The throne chamber of the Galactic King shimmered with arrogance, a cathedral of glass metal arches stretching higher than the clouds, where alien dignitaries floated, slithered, and strutted in gilded alcoves. The air reeked of perfume, ozone, and the smug certainty of a species that had never tasted true resistance. At the chamber's heart, upon a dais of living stone that pulsed like a slow heartbeat, sat the king himself, immense, jewel-armored, his voice amplified by the hall's symbiotic architecture, so that even his size seemed divine decrees. His crown was no crown at all, but a cage of molten light, a reminder to all who dared to look upon him, that he alone defined order in this galaxy. Into that light walked a human. She was unarmed, her boots clicking softly against the polished obsidian floor. Her uniform, once a proud blue trimmed with silver, bore stains of ash and char, torn at the sleeve where some forgotten battle had tried and failed to end her. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her hair streaked with gray, though she was only in her 40s, and her eyes, those steady, assessing eyes, scanned the chamber not with reverence, but with the patience of a woman who had endured worse humiliations than pomp. She walked as if each step pressed against gravity itself, as if she knew the floor might open beneath her and still would not quicken her pace. The court rippled with disdain. Whispers coiled from tentacled mouths and feathered throats. Primitive mammal, dirt blood, pest. Their voices mingled in cruel harmony, yet beneath it all hummed something else. Unease. For no matter how many insults spilled across the chamber, no one could quite smother the knowledge that this species, these smiling, fragile bipeds, had survived every extermination attempt thrown their way. The king leaned forward, talons curling over the edge of his throne. His voice cracked like thunder wrapped in silk. So this is the best your kind can send. A widow of wars. A general with no army. A joke dressed in rags. His eyes glowed like pits of molten gold. Tell me, human, do you grovel before me now? She inclined her head slightly, a gesture almost respectful, though her lips curved in the faintest smile. Groveling has never been a human specialty, Your Majesty. We do kneeling poorly. Too many bad knees from running marathons, climbing mountains, chasing toddlers through the kitchen. I'm afraid if you want groveling, you'll have to hire someone with fewer orthopedic complaints. The court erupted with hissing laughter. Some found her words amusing, others insulting, but all were intrigued. She had spoken without trembling. The king's eyes narrowed. Do you mock me in my hall? Mock, she said softly, her voice as smooth as glass. No. Humor, Your Majesty, is how humans endure things larger than themselves. A way of keeping the abyss from staring back too long. You might consider it if you ever grow tired of slaughter. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Then came the laughter again, this time edged with malice. The feathered envoy of the Thryka clicked its beak. She jokes while standing in her grave. The human woman turned her head slowly, those patient eyes settling on the envoy. Graves are places of memory, she said. Humans plant flowers there. We sit in silence there. We even tell jokes there to remind ourselves that grief never wins. If this is my grave, then it will not be empty long. The murmurs shifted. Unease rippled. Some dignitaries adjusted their collars, their jeweled eye stalks flicking nervously. The king felt it too, though he buried it under a sneer. He rose, each movement deliberate, each step echoing through the chamber, as the floor pulsed with his heartbeat. You speak as if your kind is teeth, he said, voice thick with contempt. But your fangs are milk teeth compared to us. You live short, frantic lives, breeding like vermin, clinging to stones unworthy of our notice. Humanity is tolerated only because your jokes amuse us. But today, I find your humor tiresome. The woman stood tall, despite her exhaustion. Then perhaps you've misunderstood the joke, Your Majesty. Humanity was never trying to amuse you. The king's talon flashed faster than most eyes could follow. The blow struck her across the chest, hurling her to the floor with a sickening crack. Gasps, cheers, and low growls rippled through the court. She coughed, blood spattering the obsidian tile, but her eyes, those unyielding eyes, remained fixed on him. You are a parasite, he hissed. A flicker of vermin fire soon extinguished. She forced herself up onto her knees, her breaths ragged, her bones screaming rebellion. Parasites don't raise children who dream of the stars. Vermin don't climb out of gravity wells with nothing but tin cans and stubbornness. You call us weak because you fear what we might become if given time. The king struck her again, talons raking her side, blood soaking her uniform. Still, she smiled through the pain. You can kill me, yes, but you will regret the lesson you've just taught my people. The court leaned forward, eager now. She was breaking, and they relished it. Her ribs creaked as she tried to stand again, failing, collapsing to her side. Blood pooled beneath her, crimson on black stone, a stain that would never wash clean. The king towered above her, his crown of molten light blazing brighter. You have no people here. You are alone. Her lips trembled, but not from fear. A whisper slipped out, barely audible yet carried on the hall's symbiotic acoustics, reaching every corner. You didn't kill me. You woke them. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a tremor, faint but undeniable, rippled through the chamber. Alien dignitaries shifted uncomfortably, their sensory tendrils twitching. The floating chandeliers flickered. Somewhere beyond the chamber, deep in the void, sensors registered distortions. Warp signatures, multiple, sharp as claws tearing holes in space. The king snarled, but a sliver of unease flickered in his molten eyes. The woman lay still, her body broken, yet her faint smile lingered, as if she had passed a torch invisible to all but those who would carry it. And then, from the edge of the galaxy, 5 new voices whispered across the stars. The tremors that rattled the throne chamber were faint at first, like a giant inhaling in the distance. But soon the vibrations deepened into a rhythm that unsettled even the most stoic alien dignitaries. Holoscreens blinked alive along the chamber walls, flashing warnings in a dozen languages. Unidentified warp breaches, 5 signatures tearing open the void with a precision far too neat to be accidental. The king's ministers shrieked conflicting reports, feathers and scales flaring in panic. But the king raised a talon to silence them. His crown of molten light pulsed harder, his voice steady though his pupils narrowed. Children's stories, he growled. Specters of grief. Humanity is ash. Yet even his throne seemed less certain, humming with unease beneath him. From the great gates of the chamber came the hiss of ancient hydraulics, and the vast obsidian doors parted. A cold draft swept through, scattering perfumed smoke, and there they stood, 5 silhouettes framed against the white blaze of warp fire still flickering outside. The aliens strained to see, but the figures did not rush. They walked forward in deliberate calm, their boots echoing like drumbeats. The first to step into the light was tall, broad-shouldered, his face carrying the calm gravity of someone who had memorized every lesson his mother had ever spoken. He wore no armor beyond a long black coat, the collar turned up against the chill of space. His eyes a dark, steady weight that seemed to measure every alien in the room and find them wanting. His voice, when it came, was quiet, polite, yet laced with something colder than the king's fire. You killed our mother, he said, as though remarking on the weather. That was unwise. The court erupted with laughter, mocking jeers ricocheting from alcove to alcove. The spawn of vermin, croaked a scaled admiral. They think grief is a weapon. The eldest did not move, only tilted his head slightly, and in that stillness there was more menace than any blade could carry. Next came the second, a woman with hair pulled back tight, her rifle slung across her back with the casual ease of a limb. She moved silently, eyes like glacial glass, a faint scar along her jaw. When the aliens laughed, she did not. Instead, she studied the balconies, tracing invisible lines, calculating trajectories. Her lips barely moved as she muttered to her brother, 79 hostiles in optimal range. Wind resistance irrelevant. The words were flat, clinical, but her gaze carried the promise of precision and sudden endings. The third strolled in with a grin, one hand clutching a half-eaten energy bar, the other tinkering with a device that looked suspiciously like it had been built out of scrap and stubbornness. His hair was tousled, his jacket patched with duct tape, and yet the contraption in his hands hummed with a power that made the chandeliers flicker nervously. He crunched another bite, speaking around crumbs. They really need to work on their defense grids. I've seen vending machines put up more of a fight. The court hissed, insulted, but the boy just licked chocolate from his fingers, unbothered. Behind him sauntered the fourth, barely older than a teenager, his stride cocky, his smile wide. His pilot's jacket hung open, streaked with grease and plasma burns. He twirled a broken helmet in one hand, whistling some old Earth tune no alien recognized. He winked at a cluster of officials who recoiled as though he'd spat acid. "Nice palace," he said. "Bit drafty. I give it, what, 2 orbital strikes before it crumbles? Maybe 1, if I parallel park a destroyer in the foyer." Laughter rippled, but it was nervous this time. The edges frayed. The last figure stepped forward, the youngest. Barely 15, slight of build, their face still soft with youth, but their eyes gleamed too sharp, too steady for innocence. They smiled sweetly at the crowd, tilting their head. "Are we going to play? Mom always said games are good for learning." The sweetness of the tone made the words all the more chilling. The 5 stopped at the base of the dais. The eldest spoke again, voice calm. "Surrender now, and we'll show mercy." The king rose from his throne, his bulk towering, his crown flaring until the air shimmered. "Mercy." His laughter cracked like a storm. "You dare lecture me, hatchlings? You walk into my hall with your borrowed bones and brief lives and threaten an empire that spans 1,000 suns." He raised his claws, each longer than a sword. "I killed your mother with my own hand. I will crush you with the same ease." The eldest did not flinch. He folded his hands neatly behind his back, as though lecturing a classroom. "Mother warned us about men like you. Bully on the playground, loud until the first real punch landed. She said never to waste words. But I thought out of courtesy, we'd offer you the chance." The sniper sister lifted her rifle from her back in one smooth, unhurried motion. The sound of the straps sliding against her coat sent a ripple through the balconies. Soldiers shifted uneasily, claws on triggers, tails twitching. The king barked an order. "Seize them." The guards surged. It happened in seconds. The eldest stepped aside, hands still clasped. The sniper lifted her rifle to her shoulder, not aiming, just holding. A flash of light. One guard fell before anyone registered the shot. Another 2 dropped in perfect sequence, their armor punctured with holes too precise to be anything but intentional. She did not even blink. The engineer's half-eaten bar clattered to the floor as his device bloomed open like a flower of wires. It pulsed once, twice, and the chamber's lights flickered. Half the guards' weapons sparked, dead in their hands. "Seriously," he muttered, "your tech is a joke. I built this with duct tape and spite." The pilot leapt forward, spinning the broken helmet in his hand before hurling it into a guard's face. The man crumpled unconscious before the pilot snatched the weapon from his limp grip. "Borrowing this, thanks." He fired it backward without looking, the shot felling another soldier. The youngest simply smiled, watching them drop. When one guard lunged too close, the child sidestepped lightly and whispered something too quiet to hear. Whatever it was, the guard froze, eyes wide with horror, and stumbled back as though retreat itself might save him. It did not. In less than a minute, the grand chamber was littered with groaning or lifeless guards, the echoes of violence fading into stunned silence. The 5 stood untouched, barely winded. The dignitaries no longer laughed. Some whispered frantically in their own tongues. Others shrank back into shadows. The Thryka envoy clicked its beak nervously, feathers trembling. "Children," it hissed. "Not children. Shadows." The eldest turned his gaze up to the king again. His voice was still calm, though quieter now, as if speaking intimately. "You killed our mother. That was unwise. But killing her did not end her. She lives here." He pressed a hand to his chest. The others mirrored the gesture. "And here, and here, and here, and here. You didn't silence her. You multiplied her." The king's snarl faltered. For the first time, a tremor of doubt cracked his molten mask. The engineer wiped crumbs from his lips and shrugged. "I mean, honestly, you had to know this was coming. You poke a nest, you get stung. You burn a kitchen, Mom's kids will rebuild it with better locks and sharper knives. Did nobody in this empire ever teach you to leave Earth alone? The pilot leaned casually against a broken pillar. Guess not. Their loss. The sniper chambered another round, the click reverberating like a death knell. The youngest tilted their head again, eyes wide, smile bright. Shall we play more? The king roared, the molten cage above his head flaring, so bright the chamber walls bled with cracks of heat. Yet his roar did not drown the silence of fear spreading through his council. For beneath the bravado, every dignitary could feel the tremors, not of warships, but of inevitability. Humanity had not come pleading. They had come collecting. And at the edge of a throne, where blood still stained the stone from the woman he had slain, the eldest child bent, pressed a hand against it, and whispered as if to her, "We're here now, mother. He won't laugh again." The king raised his talons to strike, but his ministers gasped, not at his rage, but at the warning alarms flashing crimson across the chamber's walls. The empire's strongest weapon, the capital's last line of defense, was no longer under their control. The display scrawled the impossible words, "Command override, human access granted." The eldest looked up, his calm eyes fixed on the king. "You woke us." The capital world bled light into the void, its towers once symbols of unbroken authority, now flickering with alarms that painted the skyline crimson. Ships scattered from their berths like startled birds, their sleek silhouettes clashing in desperate confusion as systems failed, comms scrambled, and weapons misfired against allies mistaken for enemies. Above it all, 5 human signatures moved as if orchestrating a symphony only they could hear. Where others saw chaos, they saw the opening bars of a plan their mother had carved into their bones long before her death. The eldest stood at the center of it, calm amid the storm, his coat billowing in the draft of ruptured ventilation shafts, as he issued orders with the same quiet tone he had used since childhood when breaking up arguments between his siblings. "Sniper, balconies 3 and 5. Engineer, get me the override on fleet control. Pilot, keep them guessing with orbital maneuvers. Youngest, stay close until I say otherwise." His eyes swept the chaos below without a flicker of doubt. No wasted motion. Every strike counts. The sniper nodded once, already moving. She set herself against the jagged edge of a collapsed column, the rifle humming faintly in her arms. Breath in, hold, release. One shot sliced through the throat of an alien commander rallying troops. Another shattered the visor of a heavy guard before he could fire. Each pull of the trigger was poetry, quiet, efficient, without flourish. The court's dignitaries, those who had not fled, ducked lower in their alcoves, realizing too late that the human's calm stare reached them even at impossible distances. The engineer, still chewing, his pockets jingling with spare parts, knelt beside a central console torn from a floor. Sparks spat across his face, but he didn't flinch. "Honestly, this system is a nightmare," he muttered, fingers flying as wires danced to his will. "Who designs a defense grid with a backdoor this obvious?" Mom used to say duct tape fixes everything, but duct tape would actually improve this garbage. A beep confirmed access, and suddenly the skies above the capital turned traitor. Defense satellites pivoted not outward, but inward, targeting the very fleets they were meant to protect. Alien admirals shrieked as their screens lit with betrayal, ships tearing into each other with the unerring loyalty of hijack code. High overhead, the pilot hooped through the comms, voice crackling with exhilaration. He twisted stolen fighters into maneuvers no alien manual had conceived of, spinning between plasma bolts with a recklessness that left even the ship's AI begging for restraint. "Mom always told me to keep my hands at 10 and 2, he shouted, yanking the vessel into a barrel roll that left 2 pursuers colliding in their confusion. Guess she forgot to mention it applied to steering star destroyers. His laughter rang across the comms, wild and bright, a sharp contrast to the grim discipline of his elder siblings. And then there was the youngest. Small, almost delicate, they wandered through the battlefield like a shadow pretending innocence, their boots leaving quiet prints across stone that still gleamed with their mother's dried blood. They smiled at those who hesitated to strike, tilting their head in that sweet, uncanny way. "Do you want to play hide and seek?" they asked one trembling soldier. He dropped his weapon before the words had even finished, eyes wide with primal terror. They crouched beside him, voice soft. "Then you should start running." He fled into the dark, but a moment later, screams echoed where the sniper's bullet found him. The youngest only sighed, as though disappointed in the brevity of the game. Everywhere, the empires might unraveled. Armies meant to conquer galaxies fell apart under the scalpel of human precision. Dignitaries whispered in panic, their voices blending into a chorus of fear. "They are not children," one hissed. "They are predators who wear the faces of youth." Another, older and wiser, spoke barely above a breath. The woman was never the weapon. She was the warning. Through it all, the king bellowed his fury, his molten crown sparking brighter with each loss. He flung his generals forward, sent legions still loyal, unleashed constructs that had once reduced worlds to ash. Yet every push met not resistance, but dismantling, as if the humans had studied the Empire's rhythms for years and now moved only to break them. The eldest advanced steadily toward the throne, his siblings carving paths of ruin at his side. A squad of guards blocked his way, shields interlocked, weapons raised. He paused only to adjust his coat sleeve before speaking, his voice calm, almost bored. "Last chance to step aside." They snarled and fired. He moved with sudden grace, each step an echo of training passed down in long-forgotten halls on Earth. A guard fell to the sniper's cover fire. Another was ripped apart by his brother's commandeered turret. The youngest walked straight through the smoke and whispered, "Boo," and the remaining guards fled, abandoning their posts. The throne loomed closer. The engineer clapped dust from his hands, grinning around the last bite of his snack. "Fleet's gone, orbital cannons are ours. Want me to turn the moon into confetti while I'm at it?" The eldest's eyes never left the king. "No, let it hang above them. Fear lasts longer than rubble." The pilot's voice crackled through comms, laughter thinning into steel. "He's getting desperate, pulling all reserves. I can buy you minutes, maybe less." The sniper chambered another round. "Minutes are all we need." The king's roar shook the hall as he descended from his dais, claws gouging stone, heat rolling off him in waves that seared banners from their poles. "You think yourselves wolves," he snarled, his voice booming, "but you are lambs who mistake shadows for strength. I killed the ewe. I will kill her litter." The youngest tilted their head, smiling faintly. "Lambs don't hunt kings." The eldest finally drew closer, his calm mask hardening into something colder. "You don't understand yet. Mother was not our shield. She was the match. You struck her down, and in doing so, you lit the fire." The king struck faster than sight, his talons raking the air where the eldest had stood. But the human was no longer there, his coat a whisper of motion as he sidestepped, his siblings covering each gap with seamless precision. The sniper's shot ricocheted off the king's shoulder plate. The engineer's device surged, locking a leg in place with magnetic grip. The pilot screamed overhead, crashing a stolen fighter into the hall's roof, showering sparks and debris. The youngest laughed a soft, terrible sound as they darted beneath the king's reach, slicing tendons with a blade no one had seen them draw. The king howled, molten blood spattering the stone. The dignitaries shrieked, some fleeing, others frozen. The empire's greatest hall had become a hunting ground, and the prey was its ruler. But still he fought, tearing free of restraints, hurling blasts of heat that blackened walls and seared flesh. One blast struck the sniper's shoulder, spinning her to the ground, but she rolled, reloaded, and fired again without hesitation. Another sear grazed the engineer's arm, yet he only hissed and kept typing, fingers flying as new systems bent to his will. The eldest never broke stride, his voice carrying above the chaos. "This is not revenge, Majesty. This is revelation. Humanity doesn't come begging for justice. We bring inevitability." The king lunged again, his crown blazing, so bright it cracked the ceiling, and for a moment his massive hand closed around the eldest torso, lifting him like a doll. The chamber fell silent, breath held. The king's molten eyes gleamed with triumph. One crushed, 4 to go. And then the eldest smiled, blood trickling down his chin. "You're not holding me," he whispered. "You're holding the distraction." The engineer slammed a key. The hijacked orbital defense grid fired. Not at the city, not at the fleets, but at the throne chamber itself. Precise beams lancing through walls and columns. The king staggered as supports collapsed, the hall groaning under its own weight. The eldest twisted free, landing hard but alive. His siblings closed ranks around him, 5 shadows in unison. Dust and fire filled the chamber as stone rained down. Through the choking haze, the king's roar still rose, defiant, furious, unwilling to accept the shift that had already occurred. And yet, as the hall collapsed, every dignitary still breathing understood the truth. The empire had already lost. Humanity had not come to challenge. Humanity had come to claim. The youngest brushed dust from their hair, eyes gleaming through the ruin. "Is it time to play for real?" they asked softly. The eldest looked up at the dais, half buried now in rubble, where the king still struggled to rise. His voice was calm, final, heavy with the weight of 1,000 graves and the certainty of what came next. No more games. We finish it. And as the chamber caved in around them, the surviving aliens caught one last glimpse of the 5, calm, smiling, unbroken, before the dust swallowed all, but the sound of the king's bellow, echoing like a beast cornered at last. Stone dust hung in the air like smoke from an ancient pyre, sifting through shafts of fractured light as the throne chamber groaned under its own ruin. Broken banners lay scattered across the floor, smoldering where molten fire had kissed them. The once majestic seat of the Galactic King was half buried beneath jagged slabs, yet the creature still clawed his way upward, his crown of molten light pulsing with furious defiance. His breaths came ragged, each exhale scorching the air, but his eyes, golden pits that had lorded over 1,000 worlds, still burned with the venom of a ruler who had never known defeat. The 5 stood among the wreckage, shadows in the glow of collapsing grandeur. They did not look like conquerors. They looked like children wearing grief as armor, their faces pale with dust, their hair clumped with sweat. Yet their eyes gleamed with something the king had never faced, patience sharpened into inevitability. The eldest stepped forward, his coat frayed, his chest heaving from exertion. He should have looked fragile against the molten beast rising before him, but his voice, when he spoke, carried the steadiness of a tide that would not be turned. "This ends now. Not for vengeance, not even for her. This ends because your empire believes it cannot end." He lifted his hand, the gesture calm, unshaken. "But it can. It will." The king wrenched free from the rubble, stones exploding outward as his bulk filled the chamber once more. His roar rattled the broken rafters, and fragments of glass rained down like dying stars. "You dare speak of endings to me?" His voice was thunder. "I have crushed rebellions in the womb. I have burned planets into ash for less than insolence. You are dust, parasites, nothing. I will grind your bones and scatter them so no whisper of you remains." The sniper raised a rifle, her wounded shoulder wrapped hastily with cloth torn from her coat. She winced but steadied her aim, her voice calm despite the blood soaking her sleeve. "You should stop shouting. Every time you do, you make yourself an easier target." The shot rang out, searing across his cheek. It did not kill him, but it marked him, a line of blood glowing brighter than his crown. For the first time, he bled beneath human hands. The engineer, face streaked with soot, shoved another device into a cracked panel. Sparks cascaded, systems groaning as his laughter cut through the chaos. "You've got no idea how embarrassing this is for you," he muttered. "Your entire throne world's tech undone by a guy with a sweet tooth and a roll of copper wire. Honestly, Mom's kitchen toaster gave me more trouble." With a triumphant click, he triggered the grid, and the chamber's remaining defenses turned inward, raining fire around the king in a storm of betrayal. The pilot swooped low, a stolen fighter screeching through the collapsing hall. The wind of his passage knocked ash from the rafters, his grin feral as he leaned out of the cockpit window, shouting over the roar of engines. "I told you your palace needed renovations. Hope you had insurance, big guy." Plasma bolts ripped from the fighter's cannons, striking the king square in the chest, staggering him. Through it all, the youngest walked forward, quiet amid the storm. Dust settled on their hair like snow, and their smile never wavered. They looked at the king not with hatred, but with the patient curiosity of a child examining an insect pinned to a board. "You're loud," they said softly, almost sweetly. "But loud doesn't mean strong. Mom said real strength doesn't need to scream." The words hit harder than bullets, the truth wrapping around the king like a chain he could not break. He bellowed again, striking outward, his molten claws rending stone, his heat waves scorching flesh. The eldest braced as a blast seared across his chest, nearly sending him to the floor, but the others closed around him, shielding, covering, refusing to let him fall. Together they pressed forward, step by step, an unbreakable line of grief-forged resolve. The king's fury grew desperate, his movements wild, no longer the measured blows of a monarch, but the thrashing of a beast sensing its own end. He swung at the sniper, but she dropped low, firing point-blank into the joint of his knee. He roared and stumbled, molten blood spattering across the rubble. The engineer hurled his device, magnetic locks seizing the king's other leg, holding it fast for a crucial second. The pilot roared overhead, crashing his fighter into the king's arm, tearing away one of the massive claws in a blaze of fire. The chamber shook as the king fell to one knee, his molten crown flickering, dimming. He snarled, spittle and fire mingling on his lips. "You think you have won? You are children. She was nothing. You are nothing." The eldest staggered forward, his coat torn, his face bloodied. Yet his voice was steady, calm, the very opposite of the king's raging storm. "No, we are her. Every word she gave us, every lesson, every scar, we carry them. You didn't kill her. You multiplied her." The sniper, gasping through pain, raised her rifle one last time. The engineer jammed a final override, locking the hall's core reactor into overload. The pilot leapt from his ruined fighter, rolling across stone, snatching up a discarded weapon. The youngest tilted their head, smile unwavering. 5 voices, 5 shadows, 5 echoes of the woman the king had slain, closing in. The king swung his remaining claw, but too slowly now. The sniper's shot struck his shoulder. The pilot's cannon tore into his chest. The engineer's device surged, freezing him in place. The youngest stepped forward, their small hand pressing against his molten skin without fear, their whisper soft but cutting. "Game over." The eldest raised his voice, calm as ever, the words carrying the weight of their mother's last breath. "You didn't kill her. You woke us." And together the 5 struck. The chamber exploded in light, fire, and collapsing stone. The king's roar turned to a scream, then a gurgling silence, his crown shattering into fragments that hissed as they hit the ground. His massive form toppled, molten blood soaking the dais where he had once ruled. For the first time in centuries, the throne of the galaxy stood empty. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. Dignitaries peered from hiding places, their bodies trembling, their voices hushed. The sight before them was not of monsters, but of inevitability. 5 humans standing unbroken in the ruin of empire. The eldest drew a slow breath, steadying himself, then turned his gaze upon the council. His eyes, cold and calm, swept across them all. "This is not a plea. It is not a negotiation. It is a warning. Humanity will not kneel. Not to crowns, not to empires, not to gods. Remember this day, because it is the day you learned what it means to wake us." The sniper lowered her rifle, blood dripping from her arm, but her stance unwavering. The engineer wiped soot from his hands, muttering with weary satisfaction, "Told you duct tape beats everything." The pilot laughed softly, though his grin was tired now, hollow around the edges. "Guess I finally parked that destroyer." The youngest looked up at the fractured ceiling, starlight spilling through the cracks, and whispered she'd be proud. For a long moment, none of the aliens dared move. The weight of what they had witnessed pressed down heavier than the rubble itself. Empires crumble not with silence, but with revelation, and the revelation was standing before them, dust-coated, bloodied, but smiling with the calm certainty of predators who had just claimed their prey. The eldest turned back toward the shattered body of the king, his crown fragments cooling in pools of blood. He knelt, pressing a hand against the stone still stained with his mother's life, and closed his eyes. "It's done," he murmured. Then louder to his siblings. But it's not over. The youngest looked up at him, their smile curling into something sharper, almost eager. So what do we play next? And above the broken hall, across the fractured skyline, alien ships still burned, their fleets in disarray, their leaders paralyzed by fear. Word would spread, faster than light, carried on trembling lips and shattered comms. Humanity had not begged for mercy. Humanity had declared war. In the silence that followed, the eldest opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the horizon of stars beyond the broken roof. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay the edge of inevitability. Now, he said softly, we begin.